Good evening. I'm Patricia Van Skyke, the Executive Director of the Lloyd Library and Museum. I'd like to welcome you to The Nature of Sex, the sexy side of plants. Yeah. It's safe to say that at the Lloyd Library, we've always considered plants sexy. Botanical literature abounds on plant reproduction, and who can describe our gorgeous botanical illustrations as anything but sexy? However, it took synergy and a creative eye to put tonight's program together. Our main program sponsor, Dean and Richard Alden, suggested the lecture at the same time that we were looking for a good fit for our popular program that we always offer the week of Valentine's Day. And we've had a strong and long-standing relationship with the Cincinnati Nature Center, and we wanted to reignite that. It all came together with Cory Christopher. Cory Christopher is the Director of Conservation at the Cincinnati Nature Center. He earned his bachelor's and master's degrees in ecology from the University of Georgia and a PhD in plant ecology from the University of Cincinnati. After completing his postdoctoral work at Washington University in St. Louis, he returned to Cincinnati and served as the graduate and school programs manager for the Cincinnati Zoo and Botanical Garden. He's also worked at the University of Cincinnati facilitating collaborative community action projects and served as the university's Director of Undergraduate Research. As Director of Conservation at the Nature Center, Cory pulls from these academic and professional experiences to facilitate collaborative conservation efforts aimed at protecting native ecosystems across Cincinnati and the tri-state region. Please join me in enthusiastically welcoming Cory Christopher.
Thank you. Can you guys hear me just fine? Okay. Thank you for having me, everybody. I move around a lot, so having a lapel mic helps. Thank you. So it's an interesting talk tonight. And I wanted to do a little bit of, I say interesting for me, because I'm going to be just as surprised as you are at what comes out of my mouth sometimes. Trust me. I wanted to do a brief preface. So I call myself a recovering academic, not because I don't have respect for academics, but because I learned quickly that I was a different brand of academic that was not going to be as successful in traditional academia. Specifically, I think for this talk, what I wanted to point out is I loved the scientific method. You learn about it every time you take a biology class, you guys know. And you get to the end and it's the communicate part, right? You see the communicate. And I was really more interested in communicating with groups like this, not communicating with the people that I had been doing the work with for all of those years. I felt like I was preaching to the choir. As it happens, my father was a Southern Baptist minister, so I grew up knowing what it's like to preach to the choir, literally and figuratively. And so after a lot of soul searching, I wound up at the Cincinnati Nature Center realizing that I could take this love for nature, this love for plants, and bring science, peer-reviewed, real science, sort of to the masses. Like, how do I communicate all the cool stuff that's going on in a way that people are going to, one, understand, because not everybody went to school for most of their life to learn some of this, but also that's fun, that's accessible. And so that's why I'm here. And so I think, I don't know if that's a good reputation to have built up, but it's one that I'm going to keep pushing. I don't normally have notes, but sometimes when I know I have a time limit or trying to be really good about time, I do keep my notes. But again, I'll be just as surprised as you are about some of the things I say. The other thing I will point out, I have taught like at universities. It was my favorite part of my time at universities was teaching. I had a student once who described taking a class, this is true story, described taking a class for me as, it's quote, "It's like going on a road trip driven by an excitable golden retriever, comma, you'll get there, but you're going to go on several side quests." So, and in the spirit of a good Southerner with those garden path storytelling, there's lots that I want to say. The central string of this talk is that plants are cool. Plants are essential to our survival, and lots of people could care less. Not because plants aren't cool, but because they've never been taught plants in a way that shows how interesting and vibrant plant communities are. They've been taught the old school way of, photosynthesis, and then the Calvin cycle, and at some point there's a citric acid Krebs. Yes, but I'm a plant ecologist, so I want to talk about the life of plants. And sometimes I think there's nothing sexier about plants than sex. Plants do indeed have sex. Plants have sex. In much the same way that animals have sex. And in fact, there is roughly, I don't know how many, Eric, you'll be able to help, somewhere 350,000 species of plants in the world, somewhere in that ballgame. There's not a single species of plant that's completely lost the ability to sexually reproduce. A lot of them don't as much, but there's not a single species that's completely lost its ability to sexually reproduce. And every time you eat an apple, you can thank plant sex for that apple, right? Okay. So I will be talking a lot about flowers, because even though flowers aren't the only way that plants sexually reproduce, wind also helps plants sexually reproduce. Flowers, to me, are like, and I'll get to this a little later, it's like they're like the epitome of sexual selection for me. And so we'll talk a lot about flowers, and I want to present things to you in a way that makes you kind of question, what is the difference between plants and animals again? And I'm not going to go as far as to say that plants are sentient, but I also will not say that they're not. I'm kind of an agnostic in that way. I'm not quite sure. So let's get started. This plant here, this is why I'm here. This bashful trillium. Anybody know bashful trillium? And I will say, I did not take the photos. I think a couple of them I did. They are all legally captured, but just bear with me. I promise I didn't rip them off too much. Bashful trillium, it's one of my favorites. I grew up in North Georgia. It has one of the highest diversities of trillium in the world. As a kid, I found this trillium. They're also called bashful wake robins, or just bashful trillium. It was on a hillside in my front yard. I grew up in the middle of the woods, and I was captivated by this flower. And people have heard this story before. I was captivated because it nods and looks at the ground. And when you look across the forest, they were distributed in a really weird way. Meaning there'd be a clump here, and then over here there'd be another big clump, and over there'd be another big clump. And I can remember, as a kid, I was about 9 or 10, I can remember going to the library for the first, well, not for the first time, but in the library for the first time, realizing people have written about plants like this. It didn't occur to me that there was a literature about that thing that I was seeing. And so I dug into field guides and books about plants and natural history of plants. And I just became enamored that this thing existed. And I had no idea that the reason why they're clumped, anybody know? The location of the seeds. The location of the seeds. What takes the seeds there? Ants. There are these protein-rich bodies on the seeds called the lyosomes. And the ants are trying to get those oily, protein-packed goodness, little globs of goodness from the seeds, and they take them into their mounds. And after several years, when the mounds die off, the plants remain. And as a kid, I remember that moment when I realized this is it. This is cooler than Star Wars or this is bizarre. So I know I would go on and on about this, but truly, this was the moment for me that flipped the switch for how I'd move on in my life. But again, when we learned about sexual selection, who learned about sexual selection in school? Are you allowed to learn about sexual selection in school? I remember being in college and really thinking that animals and the peacock was the only one that really had sexual selection. Because that's all you learn about. You learn about animals and sexual selection. Unfortunately, plants get a lot less attention, but they also have sexual selection. Plants exhibit sexual selection. And what's so cool for me, one of the things that blows my mind, is imagine that you want to start a family, okay? Anybody here with kids? Okay, imagine, okay, you've got children, but imagine you too didn't get to decide. This is where I make people feel awkward, and it's just for me, so don't. You two decided to have children, I'm assuming. Okay. And you said you two had children, right? Imagine, though, that you didn't get to decide. That a third agent over here in the corner decided, I'm going to pair that one and that one and that one and that one. That's what flowers face all the time. They don't get to decide where their gametes are going because they're just stuck in place. Everything is through a third agent. So in order for plants to exhibit that sexual selection and to show all this wild morphological diversity, they're relying on pollinators and wind, but that's not the sexy part. The pollinators to carry their gametes to another plant. That blows my mind. So I think sexual selection should be taught, focused on plants, but that's neither here nor there. Because I wanted to start, all this is still a wind-up because you're not ready for the good stuff yet. Plants literally were initially classified by their sex. Not by male or female, let me walk that back. By their sexual organs. Right? So Linnaeus, you guys have heard of Carl Linnaeus, I'm sure. Linnaeus, if you looked at, when he was putting a plant into a certain class, a certain taxonomic class, it was based on how many stamen that plant had, how many male parts. And the order of the plant was based on how many female parts it had. He was explicit that that was how he was going to do it. It was very useful for identifying plants. Horrible for the genetics of plants. He wasn't as much a fan of genetics at the time because nobody really knew about genetics at the time. It was a little bit of a problem. But he literally classified them based on sex. And he was not at all shy about that. At the time, he also had a friend. And his friend, Siegsbeck, is that, if you, Siegsbeck, do you know? Okay, so we're going to say that's what it is. Nobody else knows. It's what it is. It's Siegsbeckia. Why am I even asking? He had a friend, Siegsbeckia. He was another botanist. He was a German botanist? German botanist. I'm going to say he was a German botanist. And keep in mind that a lot of the scientists at the time had to walk a very narrow line because the church was still very influential. And you could pursue a study of nature, but you couldn't ever make it seem as though you were putting that before God. And so you had to walk a fine line. That's going to come up in a second. But Linnaeus straight up said, the calyx is the bedchamber, the filaments, the spermatic vessels, the anthers, the testes, the pollen, the sperm, the stigma, the vulva, the style, the vagina. He wasn't kidding around. He was explicitly saying these are synonymous. Well, Siegsbeck, who had been his friend and had opened up lots of opportunities for Linnaeus to collect plants, was aghast and described this system as repugnant and immoral. loathsome harlotry. How could bluebells, lilies, and onions be up to such immorality? Because he perceived that Linnaeus was putting plants before a moral life, that he was using all of these words that you should only use with your spouse in the bedroom to describe these beautiful flowers that God gave us. That, right? Linnaeus, I like Linnaeus. I liked Linnaeus. I loved him after this, although he didn't really believe in evolution, which bothers me a little bit. But I loved him after this because Linnaeus is like, okay, I'm going to double down. Linnaeus discovered this plant that in some reports is described as useless, a particularly small flowered plant. It's now a genus. It's now an entire genus of plant, and he named it after Siegsbeck. Siegsbeckia orientalis. It gets better though. I'm not making this up, and I'm going to walk back a little more. I'm just the messenger. Remember, the communication that I love is I like communicating other people's work because I get to we can be confused together and we can be excited together. So he names it Siegsbeckia, and then he sends a packet of seeds to Siegsbeck of Siegsbeckia. Now, Siegsbeckia knew that he had named this plant after him, but he sends this packet of seeds to Siegsbeckia, and I'm looking at my notes because I want to get the quotes right for this, and he sends this packet of, oh my goodness, I know I wrote it in here. I want to get it exactly right. He sends this packet of seeds. Why in the world is it not on here? I'm going to just go from memory from this. So he sends this packet of seeds to him, but he labels it Cuculus ingrata and pretends that the name of the seeds are Cuculus ingrata. And that's what he writes, as if I'm sending you some Cuculus ingrata seeds. You know what that translates into? Ingrateful cuckoo. I named a small flowered plant after you, and then I called you an ingrateful cuckoo. So Linnaeus just doubled down, and he was not here for the criticism, right? And we laugh, except if you read this quote by Georgia O'Keeffe, Georgia O'Keeffe was adamant until she died that she was not painting anything but flowers. She obviously recognized the resemblance. But for her, if you saw something else, that's you. Don't put that on me. And people were still very aghast that she would dare paint these sensual paintings of flowers. And this isn't the only one. There's newer artists. There's several. I went down a few rabbit holes reading about more recent artists. It hasn't stopped. But even things like Mapplethorpe, his photographs. Now, obviously, he had very specific intentions when he was taking those photos. But flowers are sensual, and that makes us feel all kinds of feelings. But they are sensual. And that's okay. That is okay to walk through a garden and realize that you're surrounded by sexual organs. It is okay in 3 days to go and collect some sexual organs from plants in a vase and give them to your significant other if you so choose. Because that's what we are doing. I mean, not to put too fine a point on it. And there's a wonderful, you can just look, there's some funny comics when you start looking at that whole phenomenon of where flowers came from. I will recommend a book, though. I did not expect to recommend this book. If you're interested in this, Flower Confidential, and I cannot remember the name of the writer right now. Amy, is it Amy? It's called Flower Confidential. It's about the cut flower industry. I think it was written in 2003. Phenomenal. It is a fantastic book. I didn't think I would be interested in it, but I loved it. So Flower Confidential. It's a phenomenal book. So really, this is the first slide in the presentation, and we are 26 minutes in. But we're going to get there. I just wanted to set the scene that, well, I think you guys will see. I do want to take a little bit of time just to do a little bit of review. I'll unblur now for those of you who need it. What we're really talking about, I'm not going to go through dioecious species, monoecious species, perfect flowers, imperfect flowers. I just want us all to remember that a lot of flowers have both male and female parts. Some plants only have male parts. Some only have female parts. And still some plants will have male flowers on the plant and female flowers on the plant, but not the same sexual organs on the same flower. So when we start, and I'm not getting into gender, but when we start thinking that everything is so binary, it's all over the place. Things get muddy very quickly. So I'm just going to be talking about, in general, male and female, just to make things clear. I feel compelled to point that out, that flowers really muddy the water, and I think it's fantastic. But our connection to flowers, I think, it goes much deeper. There's certainly, you guys have heard of biophilia. I certainly think there's this phytophilia. I was saying earlier, I started out, I was going to be a small mammal ecologist because I thought that, my dad told me you can't make money, you can't make a living playing in the woods and talking to people. I showed him, boy. And so I was going to be a vet, and so I thought I would do small mammal ecology, and then I realized plants were really the way to go because I just loved them. I thought they were so interesting and so cool. And there was a really interesting study out of the Czech Republic that they had a couple thousand people that they interviewed just asking about what flowers are the most attractive. And what was interesting is the results were pretty clear that people preferred blue-colored flowers that were radially symmetric and in general were uncomplicated. So not a lot of stuff going on. So of those flowers, this would have been deemed the most attractive. Yellow flowers were deemed the least attractive. I know. I know. I have no idea. But one thing that the other thing that I don't know if I completely agree with, apparently shape had more to do with the beauty of a flower than did color. So this would have been the most. Now, why does this matter? Why are we attracted to flowers? Think long ago when our, great, 1,000 greats ago, grandparents were looking for places to settle down. What might flowers indicate? Fertile ground, fertile soil. Primates are pretty good at spotting red in particular, but it's thought that our connection to flowers might be because early on that was a sign that there would be food there, right? However, one thing that's interesting is a lot of us think, and I thought actually until I was preparing this talk and I went down another rabbit hole, the color of flowers doesn't always have everything to do with the pollinators. So plants have to first survive and protect themselves, right? If you are this ostentatious red hibiscus in the front yard of your average suburban home in Cincinnati, you're going to get taken out by a deer pretty quickly. And your fitness, the number of children you leave behind will be a big fat zero. So you got to walk that line between being too showy and not showy enough to attract pollinators, right? And there's an interesting study about Fritillaria. It's one of my favorite genera of plants. There was a study that looked at the compounds, like anthocyanins are basically compounds that'll make flowers certain colors, but anthocyanins also play a role in like UV protection. They can also deter herbivores. And when you combine those environmental pressures with pollinators, you wind up with a plant becoming certain colors, not just because of the pollinator, but all of these other environmental factors play into what color a flower is ultimately going to be. So being safe or being sexy is a pretty important point for plants. Like you have to walk that line. And so on top of already your mate is being chosen by a bumblebee, you also might be eaten before the bumblebee can see you. To me, the plants are, they're bombarded with all of these challenges to reproduction. And so angiosperms, so when I say angiosperms, flowering plants, they came along, that's 250 million years ago, and you instantly saw, 250, is it 250 million years ago? You instantly saw this incredible increase in the biodiversity on planet Earth, in part because of that explosion in the number of flowers. Why did that matter? Well, they hit land, they needed to get their pollen from one to another, and suddenly you had specialization. You had pollinators that were only going to certain flowers, and you had flowers that were reducing how much nectar they were going to make because they could always get tricks. They're up to tricks so that they didn't have to produce as much nectar. You had all of these incredible coevolutionary interactions. And so flowers really are, I would say, really are the reason we have such incredible biodiversity. That aside, I could go on and on. Anybody know what catfishing is? I discovered this word late in life too. It's where you pretend to be somebody you're not so that you can get a date. We didn't call it catfishing. We just called it lying when I was in college. But there's a whole bunch of orchids. This is my favorite. It's a bee orchid. They're all across Europe, the Mediterranean, North Africa, the Middle East. What do they look like? They look like a female bee. What is that bee doing? He's resting. He's attempting to mate. Now see those little things? I'm going to go back one so you can see it before. See how they point down? What do you think's all over those? And then the bee comes in. This orchid has produced no nectar. Nectar's sugar, right? Sugar is what plants make out of sunlight. Well, they don't really make it out of sunlight, but you know what I mean. That is expensive. If you could get a pollinator, if you could get a date and not have to pay for dinner, and it works. I'm going to go one further. Now, this is a busy slide. I don't apologize for it because there's a lot to show you. Okay, this orchid, just blow up the middle, and now you've got this, okay? You guys see these black dots? Okay, those are just dots. Those are just freckles on the plant. You guys see those white dots? Those are hoverfly eggs. What do you think hoverfly larvae eat? Not orchids. And what do those look like from a distance? So the dots look like aphids from a distance. The hoverflies, not only that, hang on. They look like aphids, and the flowers emit, this part killed me. They emit pheromones given off by aphids when aphids are alarmed. I didn't, one, know that aphids could be alarmed, and two, that they had chemicals that they gave off when they were. But they do. And this plant exudes chemicals that mimic those. So not only do they look like aphids, they smell like aphids. And hoverflies lay their eggs inside. It's just nuts. It's nuts. And here's the incredible part. Not only are they laying their eggs, right? But the orchid also wants to make sure that it's getting pollinated. So when they land and lay their eggs, if they go too far down, so like you kind of have to flip it. The dots are here. There's all these downward pointing hairs. So when they land to lay their eggs on what they think is an aphid, what do you think happens? They just fall to the bottom of the bloom. And in order to get out, they're forced to wedge themselves between like a car wash roller covered in pollen. No nectar. And they emerge, go to the next flower, do the same thing, and their eggs die because there's no aphids for them to eat. This is the one that, this was the one of the ones I was reading about that they, okay, I'm excited. This was another species of the same aphid mimic orchid that they actually extracted those pheromones from to prove that they were chemically mimicking the pheromones from the aphid. So it wasn't just conjecture. They proved it. And the name of the paper is Smells Like Aphids. They're having sex via fungus gnat, or via flies, via hoverflies. These guys are having sex via fungus gnats. You guys know Jack in the Pulpits? If you don't, you should. They're one of the coolest plants. They're a native plant. I love them. They're truly, I say this about a lot of plants, they truly are one of my favorites. All right, let me just ask you something. If you were a flower, how much sense would it make for you to kill your pollinator? None, right? Because you're not going to get pollinated. But what if you had males and females of the plant? So that I'm male and there's a female here. If I'm the female and I just want to receive pollen, I don't care if you die afterwards. But if I'm the male, oh, I need you to take my pollen somewhere else. So Jack in the Pulpits have two very different morphologies. This is a male, that's the female. When fungus flies find the Jack in the Pulpit, because Jack in the Pulpits, they exude pheromones that smell like fungi. Fungus gnats want fungi. I mean, plants have no chill. So they go in, they fall down, because it's slippery, they fall down, and in going around and around and around the bottom, they wind up collecting all the pollen on the stamen, which are way down here. There's a tiny hole in the male that the fungus gnat can escape from. And then he goes and finds a female, falls in, but if you're the female, take your time with females. This is not just a quick, it's a lesson to we learn, stick around for a while. So much so, they die inside the flower because there's no escape hole. There's no escape hole. And this is a carnivorous plant. The paper I read was making a direct comparison because one of the questions that a lot of the people in this world are curious about, are they digesting the insects afterwards? Are Jack in the Pulpit carnivorous? As far as we know, no. They're not actually digesting them. It is strictly a sex thing. Just bring me the pollen and then die. And we'll go about our day. This is why I get excited. And this is why I think if everybody knew this about plants, and just, it's like, I'm going to calm down and move on. But the next time you see a Jack in the Pulpit, just keep that in mind, that this thing kills its pollinators. It's all right. Now, I do, because I am very focused on native plants. I'm looking at a lot of things I should have said, but I'm just going to keep going because at this point, we're in. So I did want to highlight some natives, including Jack in the Pulpit. But I also wanted to, I am just discovering this too. Again, I'm the messenger. We're learning some of this stuff together. This is Cornus canadensis. I've known the plant for a while. You guys know dogwood trees? It's the same genus. Well, it used to be the same genus as dogwood. The dogwood tree has changed genus stupidly. Botanists did that. But it's still in Cornus. The reason I say that is because they only get like that tall. They're not like your huge dogwood. All right, they're called bunchberry. They're a gorgeous native. If you need a really good native land cover for shady, dappled shady spots, you can't really beat them. They're just really hard to find. So you need to find somebody that knows something about growing native plants at a nature center. So they also have pollen. Okay. They emit their pollen based on and it's not buzz pollination, which I will get to in a second, based on something landing on it. Some little bee lands on it, and then it will puff its pollen. Now, I say puff because I want to see your faces when I actually tell you what happens. I got to find these numbers because, all right, a Formula One car accelerates at about, and I didn't know this, and if I'm wrong, tell me. I don't know anything about Formula One. 4 to 6 Gs, like G-force. A fighter jet pilot, about 9 Gs. A bullet fired from a gun, minimum 1,000 Gs, up to 10,000 Gs. Space shuttle launch, 3 Gs. They emit their pollen 2,400 Gs. But it's like powder, so it's not like flying through the air, but each little pollen is experiencing 2,400 times the force of gravity. I had a whole other slide after this that I did not include because there were a lot of things that I wanted to talk about when I went down this rabbit hole. But why? Why? The idea, supposedly, is it ensures that the bee or the pollinator gets covered in pollen. Yeah. But then it also might enable wind pollination. Because if you are really putting it out there, it might double your chances of some other plant getting pollen on them. 2,400 Gs. It's incredible. Plants are incredible. I will say, a human sneeze is 10 Gs. Hercogamy. I want to backtrack a bit. When I say sexual reproduction, plants, again, are a little bit different than animals. If a plant is able to pollinate itself, that's still sexual reproduction. Right? So selfing is still sexual reproduction. The reason that's important, with hercogamy, all of this means is that the female parts of the plant and the male parts of the plant are just separated. Why would they be separated? I'll give you a little more info. In most cases, plants would rather not they would rather not self-pollinate. They would rather pollinate something else. So why have the two removed, the male parts and the female parts? It's a lower chance that you're going to wind up accidentally pollinating yourself. That is a sentence I never thought I would say. With hibiscus, well, actually, let me go back to this. With hibiscus, when they detect, I don't know how they detect, that they're not being pollinated, the stamen begin to move back towards the pistils. Because if I'm not getting other flower or pollinators coming to me, I better take advantage of the fact that I'm fertile right now. And I'm going to self-pollinate. Oh, it gets crazier. Now, the native hibiscus, there's a few native hibiscus, they also do this, but I couldn't find any pictures that really showed the mechanism, and I thought that was important. With this particular study, it was on hibiscus hirta, maybe, hirtus. This particular hibiscus, if they're in the act of folding back to pollinate themselves, if a bee then lands on it and the flower realizes, oh, wait a minute, there are pollinators, the stamen just goes straight again. Like, oh, I was wrong. I better hold out a little more for a pollinator. They know when things are here. Sorry. They change their minds. I say that not to be trite. They change their minds. They somehow realize, well, I might actually have a shot tonight. Like, I'm going to go home from the bar early. No, actually, I see somebody that just came in. I might have a shot tonight. And I just. How long does this take to happen? I don't know. But it's on the matter of hours, not days. Because a typical hibiscus bloom, a lot of them, you get a day and you're already gone. So we're not talking very long at all. And they call this autonomous self-pollination because in a lot of cases, plants are they wind up getting self-pollinated because the bee decided to do it. This is a case where the plant, and I am going to anthropomorphize because it makes it more romantic. The plant decides when it's going to self. The plant has some agency over its own reproduction. That's another slide that I didn't include on here because I am apolitical. All right, buzz pollination. This was another thing that I had heard about and I didn't read about that much because I thought I knew what it was, and then I got into another rabbit hole where I thought this is like another really great part about plants. All right, some plants have they are buzz pollinated, which means like tomatoes, blueberries, some others, which means the anthers. Yes, the anthers. Or what's called poricidal. They're porous. They have holes in them. Think of like a colander. And the pollen's on the inside, and it's just hanging out at the end of the flower. But unless a particular pollinator that has a particular wavelength, basically of like buzz, comes along, the pollen doesn't get shaken out. So it requires, and in particular bumblebees are really good at this because they're really big and they'll land on the flower and they actually will buzz without, they don't fly away. That'd be really counterproductive, but they're landing and they're buzzing and that makes the pollen fall. Now they do eat some of the pollen, but they're also getting pollen all over them. What is crazy about this though is supposedly the theory is that this allowed some plants to choose for larger, hairier, I don't know why the hairier would work, maybe that helps with the vibrations, but they could choose their pollinators better. So instead of letting anything that lands on me get pollen, no, only the biggest that are able to buzz in the right way are actually going to get any pollen out of me, right? So it's buzz pollination. I just thought that was, and it's about 400 to 500 hertz, I guess, is the frequency that they want. So if you're wondering why your tomatoes aren't setting fruit, you just have to go out in the garden and buzz a little. Send me a video if you do. Okay. So if you are a flower, and if you could be almost certain that there is a pollinator there before you begin to produce nectar or produce a scent. Think of how much energy you could save. Flowers are grounded because they're in the ground. And so they tend to have a negative electric field. Like all of us have an electric field, not like, crystals and stuff, but we have an electric field. And flowers tend to have a negative electric field. Bees, things that are flying around, aren't grounded. They don't touch the ground. They wind up having a positive electric field. Now, we have known for a while that bees can see that electric field. Whatever C might mean for bees, we don't really know. But they can detect electric fields. So bees, we're going to go in order. This is a type of petunia. It is one that's popular in the horticulture industry. This is Petunia integrifolia, maybe. I can't even read it anymore. Integrifolia. These will sense, hang on. We know through work on these that they are feeling their environment, and they will not produce nectar or a scent until they detect the specific difference in electric field of pollinators around them. And when they detect an electric field around them, then they will begin producing some sort of nectar reward for the bees and actually smelling, although I don't know if we can smell it or if it's the bees that can smell it. But they're detecting bees. They know that their pollinators are there. They don't have eyes. They don't have ears. They don't have a nose. And bees know too. This is an example of what bees supposedly see. Bees prefer flowers that have not already been pollinated. Because of course, and they will ignore flowers that have been pollinated. Because if a flower has been landed on by a bee, that negative and positive, I guess it increases the electric charge of the flower, like neutralizes it. And bees can see that, and they ignore those flowers because there's probably less pollen there. Pollinators, let me just say this. Pollinators and the plants they're pollinating are communicating via electricity. Wrap your mind around that. They're communicating via electricity. I think we're going to be right on time, but I'm excited now, so we're just going to keep going because the next one. So there is a group of plants. They're the poissons nassa, or poissons, but I took French in college, so it's hard for me to see that and not say poisson. Nassa. It is in the Americas and in Africa. It is this. Well, you can see it. It's right up here. There was a group of ecologists that went in and they basically manipulated when these plants were being visited by fake pollinators, basically a paintbrush. And they would go to, let's say, this group and say, okay, I'm going to come every 10 minutes and pollinate you guys. To you, I'm going to come every hour and pollinate you guys. And they did that for ever how long they did it. And what do you think happened in terms of the plants producing nectar rewards? And, importantly, releasing pollen, mature pollen. The plants learned to predict when the pollinators were going to arrive, and they would only release, because they have a very predictable rate at which they release their stamen. Normally, they'd say they have them down like this, but there's others that are sort of tucked up, waiting. You see those that are like waiting to be released? And they only released them, the same group, the same plants, like genetically the same, like basically clones. This group learned every 10 minutes we better be ready. This group learned every hour we better be ready. And the only thing that, I mean, they're calling it memory. The only thing I can liken it to is memory. They may not have brains, but they remember when they were last pollinated, and they prepare for that. And it saves them having to especially lose pollen. So they just keep their pollen protected until they have to present it to a pollinator. Who would have thought, you can see the close-up, who would have predicted this? They remember. This is when I talk about, like, let's question these arbitrary barriers we've put up between plants, animals, fungi. We're more closely related to fungi than to plants, which I think is wild. Questioning this a little bit, that they may not be sentient in that they're not out there writing books, but there's certainly more going on than we ever thought. There's only a couple more slides. Seed dehiscence. This is another great one. This is a wild cucumber. It's native to Ohio. I did have a video. I was afraid to play the video only because the last time I did it was a little glitchy. But when these seeds are ready, so now they've already been pollinated. Now they just need to get their seeds out, right? They need to get them as far away from the mother plant as they can, because I don't want to compete with my offspring, because they're going to wind up living in my basement until they're well into their 30s. I want them out of the house. These guys, and I did write down the exact numbers, when they release their seeds, they're releasing them at approximately 25.7 miles per hour. Usain Bolt could run at 27.33 miles per hour. There's a Mediterranean species, not the same species. It's a Mediterranean cucumber. I don't know how closely they actually are related. I think they're in the same family. It releases its seeds. I didn't show it because I wanted to focus on the native. It releases its seeds at 60 miles an hour. And you can actually see videos of them. The one from the Mediterranean is called appropriately the squirting cucumber, because it just shoots. You can see the seeds flying through the air. This guy, the sandbox tree, it is got these real woody looking seed pods. They're like yay big. And they dry out like that, but see how they're curly? How the insides kind of curl up? There's so much tension in those curls that when they finally get released, they're shooting their seeds out at 160 miles an hour. It injures people. It hurts people if they get hit. It's also got the big trees that you see of it. This isn't one of the biggest I saw. They have thorns and toxic sap. And they shoot things at you. This is why, this is why I have been accused. I was told once that I needed to be less enthusiastic in my presentations. This is way back in the old days. For me, I truly get amazed when I think about the things that are going on, and people say, well, you shouldn't anthropomorphize. I have to. I'm a person. Everything I see is through the lens of a person. And in order for me to understand it, I need to make that connection. And I think if we all made that connection and were comfortable and told that it's okay to make those connections between a plant and what you're doing, we would all be more likely to fall in love with plants. We tend to fall in love with animals because they're warm and they move around and they poop and they eat and they have sex in a way that we're more familiar with. But plants are doing the same kinds of things, and we're not aware of it because it's a little different than what we're used to. So what I'm really excited about, truly, and I know this sounds like I'm just blowing sunshine, I love that I'm here. I also love that I work at the Nature Center. Our two organizations have very similar personalities, I would say. I love being able to tell stories in a way that is just as wild and offbeat and sometimes, bizarre and awful as nature can be. I like to see people getting excited and being like, what? I love that feeling. And I think if we can get more kids to be excited about stuff like that, and excited, and not that it turned out that great, but excited about how a simple flower like a trillium is distributed across the forest floor, and helping them pursue that because it's weird to them, right? And they just want to nerd out to that. I think we're more likely to see some of those conservation successes that we all dream about. So with all of that, the only plug I'll give, we are doing a garden tour. We've been putting together a native garden tour. It's going to be June 27th. Tickets go on sale March 1st. One thing that I want to get in front of you guys, and I'm actually genuinely asking for help here. The biggest issue with garden tours, it's finding gardens. And especially, we've only been doing this for 6 years now. It's really hard for younger garden tours to find gardens. So if you know of a garden, if you have a garden, and I'm not looking for like pristine yards. What I'm looking for is a good story. I want somebody who says, I'm just getting started with natives, this whole low impact native. My yard doesn't look great, but I'm trying really hard. I want those gardens. I want them to be accessible. I want people who have dogs and kids and ugly above ground pools that they have to take down every year because their wife and kids really like it. I want those because that's just like this talk. I want us to feel like this is accessible. I want us to be able to be excited about our yards and our gardens and feel proud of them. So if you know of a garden, truly, I don't want these, because we go from the super pristine gardens that I could never dream of to gardens that are pretty and they're well tended, but they are 1/10 of an acre in Madisonville, and they're still phenomenal because the person has a good story about what they're trying to do there. So let me know. Just see Christopher at cincynature.org, or just go to cincynature.org and let me know if you have a garden you want to show off. And with that, I'll stop. I'll shut up. Thank you all.
We have a few minutes for questions. Anybody have any questions?
Yes.
When you were talking about the bees not wanting to pollinate something that's already been pollinated, is that like every bee, every flower, or certain flowers, certain bees?
For the most part, it's every bee, every flower. Most bees prefer, and again, I say most bees, the ones I've talked to, they tend to want the most pollen they can get for each flower visit, and there's lots of studies that have looked at that. So in general, evolutionarily, a bee is benefited if it can select the flower with the most pollen because it's the fewest trips that it's got to make for food and for moving around. Yeah.
You're saying the most pollen. Does the bee want the pollen or does it want the nectar?
Both. So some bees, bees will eat pollen, bees will eat nectar. Some plants will produce more pollen than they're going to use for reproduction because they know they got to feed the bees. So sometimes I'll use them synonymously because there's some plants, and Eric could be better probably at this, but there's some plants that they'll produce both nectar and pollen that things eat. There's some bees that only want the nectar. Butterflies are really usually only going for nectar. So those two, yeah.
When I was in graduate school, I studied the sex of Lynantha's flower out in California.
Really?
And it wasn't as exciting as it is.
Oh, thank you.
Trust me. I have more of a comment than a question. I'm amazed when you think about evolution. I guess my thoughts are pretty primitive. You're looking at the morphology, the structure of the plant. You never think of the intellectual side of it. I mean, that's amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, how does that evolve, I guess?
Just like the idea that plants might be making decisions.
Yeah.
And if you think about it over millions of years, I mean, biochemical pathways can be nothing else but biochemical pathways and electricity. Those plants that were, for example, predicting their pollinators, the plants that could disperse their pollen in more efficient ways were more likely to leave behind offspring. And over millions of years, they just got better and better. I don't know. That's what I think is so cool. I have no idea how that developed. But there's who wrote The Hidden Life of Trees? Steve.
Oh,
No. He wrote not the canopy.
it was a woman, wasn't it?
Yes. It was a man, Steve Wahlgren. He was a German forester. Is it Hidden Life of Trees or Secret Life of Trees? Hidden Life of Trees. Has anybody read that? Okay. So then here's where I just get bossy. You don't have to tell me to shut up. Hidden Life of Trees if you're here tonight, you have to read it. If I see you out, I'm going to ask you if you read it. Hidden Life of Trees is phenomenal. Nature Fix by Florence. I always have to go Florence Williams because I once announced that Florence Henderson was the one that had written it. Florence Williams, The Nature Fix, phenomenal. Botany of Desire, Stephen Pollan. Michael Pollan, I said Stephen. Michael Pollan, one of my favorites. Those are the ones, and I like the forestry one because he talks a lot about things that trees know, and a lot of times it's the communication via the fungal networks under the soil. And he's got a couple other books. Is it Wahlgren? It's really bothering me. And I'll just be blunt. The one about The Secret Life of Trees is the only one of his that I enjoyed. I'm so sorry if you like the other ones. The other ones were a little too woo-woo, even for me. But yeah, Secret Life of Trees.
It's
Peter.
Walpen. WOHLLEN.
Walpen. I have read it, I promise. It's phenomenal. I loved it. I absolutely loved it. So, but I don't know. I don't know how it evolved, but they did. Because, I mean, we have evidence that plants are thinking and doing things that we have no concept of. Oh, and if we've got time, well,
Yeah, we do.
I don't.
So you were talking about the electrical field.
Yes.
And the pollinators.
Mhm.
You know, do you know if there's any research about the mix-up of frequencies and
Oh, I got excited predicting what you're going to say. Mix up of frequencies.
for the bees to be able to pollinate where they get the signal mixed up?
Like because of cell phones and stuff like that? And cell
Yes.
towers? Yes. Yes. I did. This was a rabbit hole I did not present because it really wasn't as sexy as I was hoping for. We do know that things like radio towers, anything that emits a kind of electric current can influence how bees detect the flowers that they're supposed to be pollinating. And presumably, I would assume the flowers are also affected, but I have read nothing that said the flowers, that show evidence that flowers are affected by them. But I have read numerous studies that have said bees are likely to have trouble communicating because of the overuse of these signals, 100%. The last thing I would say, it is not as sexy, but this, again, I'm surprised that I'm even talking about this. There's a plant, I don't remember, it's a vine, it's a mimic vine, so it wants to blend into its surroundings to avoid being eaten. And when it grows, gosh, I'm going to have to Google it. When it grows, its leaves are so flexible and plastic in the shape they take, whether they're pointed or round or lobed, that the plants will, the other one is Light Eaters. That's another book. I'm all over. The plant, when it grows, it can detect the shape of the leaves growing around it and it will grow to be the same shape as its its neighbors. It will change its leaf shape. Do you know what it is?
I'm curious if I think that study was done. I can't remember the name of the vine. Sorry, I can't remember the name of the plant itself, but I believe they tested it with artificial vines.
They did. Yep. I think it's a passiflora. Is it? Oh, yeah. It might be a passiflora, a passion flower. Oh, I've read this years ago, but they change their leaf shape because somehow they can detect the other plants around them. So if you read, there's another book by Zoe Schlanger, I think, called Light Eaters. It made my top 5 books of like, I say that about books and plants. They're all my favorite. This one truly is. The Light Eaters, I think it's Zoe, I think it's Schlanger. But if you look up Light Eaters, you can't miss it. The first name's Zoe. It is like, I really couldn't, I'm a nerd, but I couldn't put it down. Like, this is everything I am. So if you really want especially a good weekend book, you can get through it in a weekend. It's phenomenal.
Just about her, she's coming to the Mercantile. She's on their new schedule.
When is she coming?
I forget, but the tickets aren't on sale yet, but they go on sale like 6 weeks. So if you look at Mercantile Library, their schedule, she's on it.
Okay, I'm really excited. Her book is fun. I just really liked her book. Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
I have to ask this question. You've talked about sex a lot tonight,
Uh-huh.
but is there any proof that the plants experience any kind of pleasure from what's going on?
I want to laugh and make a face like that's a silly question, but I looked that up. I could find nothing that shows plants experience anything even approximating joy or happiness or satisfaction through anything, whether it would be sex or anything. So I would say probably not. But again, I do genuinely call myself an agnostic in this area. I will say plants don't experience joy, but I will say I don't think they experience joy, but if somebody told me tomorrow they do, I am all ears, open-minded, ready to hear the evidence. But everything I could read, they don't experience any kind of joy. There's no remembering. Well, there's remembering that there's pollinators, but there's no so for example, there's parental care in plants. I call it parental care. I got turned down by the American Journal of Botany because I called plant behavior once, seed behavior. I'm not bitter. Because we do know that plants that are eaten by herbivores, when they set seed, the seedlings from those seeds come out already prepared to defend themselves against herbivores. Whereas the same plants that are not eaten by herbivores, their seeds, when they germinate, their babies are not prepared for herbivores. So we know that there's some amount of parent to offspring communication in plants, warning the offspring that there are predators around, right? So when I read that study, it's like, okay, there's something going on in plants that I can't explain. And that would be the closest thing to that sense of, I don't know, happiness or joy or thinking or something.
Does it come close to consciousness?
So there was a book written in the 60s. It was called I don't remember. There was a book written in the 60s that basically were saying plants were sentient and they had all these feelings and that they were, they could think. And in Light Eaters, actually, that book, she mentions this, it turned lots of scientists away from even pursuing that line of research because people were just bashing this person who wrote the book. In that book, they would have said, yes, plants are experiencing all of these things, we just don't know how to measure it. Now, just within the past maybe 10 years, and this is just a sideline, hobby line of reading for me. I just think it's fascinating. So I'd say in about the past 5 years, Americans have settled down enough to be open-minded again to at least consider pursuing this. And it was about the same time, I think, that we started adopting like forest bathing might be a good idea. Maybe we can look into more like Eastern mindsets. So I think that book in the 60s ruined it for a lot of us for a very long time, but now we're...
Secret Life of Plants.
Yes, that Secret Life of Plants. I was going to say it's different than The Secret Life of Trees, I promise. I haven't read that book. I want to, but that book apparently might have given a lot of people a bad taste in their mouth for the very things that we're talking about. So at the science, the Western science now, we were just so nervous about pursuing that research that we're still learning a lot of this stuff right now. Like, we don't know how pollen actually makes it to the ova in a lot of plants. Like, we know it gets through a pollen tube, but a lot of the mechanisms by which a pollen gets to the ova, we don't know. So we don't know how the fruit that you ate today, we don't know how it got here. We know the pollen had to make it to the ova, but we don't really know what the mechanism is. So there's so much that we still can't fathom.
But you know, we, and I especially, don't even understand ourselves. You know, what is it that gives us joy? Mm-hmm. Is it those neurotransmitters and hormones? Thank you, Eric. that are causing that, or is there more than that? So, is it all there is chemistry?
Yeah, and even recognizing, my wife and I were talking about this today. You know, I married a woman scientist, so we talk about lots of issues. But even today, we're talking about women's health and how a lot of the things that we think about human health were based on studies with just men, because women were somehow seen as it wasn't important to study the women in those issues. So it's like, we don't know so much about our own bodies, and there's too many of there's too many of us mediocre white men expressing lots of opinions that we should probably just keep to ourselves in most cases. Sorry.
Well,
sorry.
On that note.
I didn't expect that either, but.
Well, Cory, thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. I know
Thank
that I know I'm going to be looking at plants differently, and I'd like to thank all of you for coming and joining us tonight. Some of the upcoming programs that we have is our next webinar is the chemistry of botanical beverages from sweet to bitter, and that's with Ed Kennelly of University of New York. And then our next in-person program is Flora's Daughters, 7 Plants Through the Lens of Eclectic Medicine, Contemporary Herbalism, and Botanical Illustration. And you can find more about these and all of our other programs on our website, on our Facebook page, and also we have postcards at the back of the room. I also want to say that programs like these are supported by members of the Lloyd Library, and if you're a member, and I see many in the audience, thank you. If you're not a member, we invite you to join us, and you can do that online. You can do it, you could do it here tonight. You could do it by mail. I hope you had an opportunity to see the Botany of Beverages exhibition. This will be open through April 24th, and we hope to see you soon. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.